My name isn't important. For now, you can call me John. What matters is the story I'm about to tell, a story I never thought I'd share with the world. I've lived a life most people would envy. Wealth, influence, and access to circles of power that few even know exist. But behind the luxury, there was a darkness, a shadow that consumed me for years. I was a member of the Illuminati. I was recruited in my late 20s, at the height of my career. I was ambitious, driven, and always looking for the next big opportunity. My rise through the corporate world was meteoric, and I quickly found myself surrounded by people who seemed untouchable. These weren't just successful individuals. They were power brokers, people who didn't just play the game, but made the rules. It started at an exclusive party, the kind of event where everyone is somebody. A man I had never met before struck up a conversation with me. He spoke about potential, about unlocking doors I didn't even know existed. At first, I thought it was just networking, another high-powered connection. But as the weeks went by, the offers became more specific and the implications more serious. They promised me everything I'd ever dreamed of: financial security, unparalleled influence, and the chance to shape the world in ways I couldn't yet understand. All I had to do was say yes. Looking back, I realize how naive I was. I didn't ask enough questions. I didn't wonder why me. I was blinded by ambition, and I walked willingly into their world. The initiation was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It wasn't just a ceremony. It was a test of loyalty, of submission. They made it clear, this was a one-way door. Once you entered, there was no turning back. At the time, I told myself it was worth it. But as the years went on, I began to see the cost, not just to myself, but to the world around me. Being part of the Illuminati meant access to secrets, to power, but also to a kind of darkness I had never known. Decisions that shaped nations were made in rooms most people would never see. People's lives, entire economies, were manipulated like pieces on a chessboard. And all the while, they demanded absolute loyalty. Questioning the system wasn't an option, and disobedience came with consequences I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. I spent years living this double life, trying to justify my choices. But no amount of wealth or power could silence the voice in my head telling me that what I was part of was wrong. That's why I'm here now. Speaking out is dangerous, but staying silent would be worse. This is just the beginning of what I need to share. Looking back, it's strange to think about how subtle the process was. There was no dramatic invitation, no mysterious envelope with cryptic instructions. It all began so innocently, yet it changed the course of my life forever. I was at a point in my career where I felt unstoppable. I had climbed higher and faster than most, and I was beginning to think there were no limits to what I could achieve. Then came the invitation to a private gathering. It was unlike anything I had experienced before. The guest list included people whose names you'd recognize instantly: CEOs, politicians, even cultural icons. At first, I thought it was just a perk of success, a chance to mingle with the elite. During the event, I was approached by a man who seemed to know everything about me. He complimented my work, my ambition, and my vision. He told me I had potential that could be unlocked with the right guidance. The way he spoke made it sound like an opportunity, not a proposition. He asked questions about my goals, what I wanted to achieve, and what I was willing to do to get there. Over the weeks that followed, I found myself invited to more exclusive gatherings. The people I met seemed to have an aura about thema confidence that came from knowing they controlled things most of us could never imagine. They hinted at secrets, at connections that could make the impossible possible. They talked about shaping the world, not just reacting to it. Eventually, I was offered a choice. They said they saw something special in me, that I could be part of something bigger than myself. They promised access to knowledge, power, and resources beyond anything I had ever dreamed of. All I had to do was prove my loyalty and accept their guidance. It didn't feel like coercion. They didn't pressure me. Instead, they appealed to my ego, my desire for success. They made it seem like joining them was the natural next step in my journey. And so I said yes. What I didn't understand at the time was that this wasn't just an invitation, it was a test. Every move I made from that moment on was being watched, analyzed. They wanted to see how far I was willing to go, what I was willing to sacrifice. And as I would soon learn, The sacrifices they demanded weren't just professional or financial. They went far deeper than I could have ever imagined. That night, I crossed a line I couldn't uncross. The world I was stepping into was seductive and terrifying, full of promises and secrets. At the time, I thought I had everything to gain. I had no idea what I was about to lose. Once I was inside, the reality of the Illuminati was far more unsettling than I ever imagined. At first, it felt like a dream come true. The power, the wealth, the excess was intoxicating. But as I climbed deeper into their world, the layers of secrecy began to unravel, revealing truths that still haunt me to this day. The first thing I noticed was the obsession with control. Nothing within the organization happened by chance. Every action, every meeting, every decision was meticulously planned. They operated like a finely tuned machine, with every member playing a specific role. From controlling financial markets to influencing cultural trends, their reach extended into nearly every corner of society. But the most shocking aspect was their rituals. These weren't the harmless ceremonies people joke about on the internet. They were intense, calculated, and deeply symbolic. I witnessed things that seemed straight out of a horror movie. Rituals designed to bind members together and to something much darker. Participation wasn't optional. It was an initiation, a test of loyalty. To refuse would have been seen as betrayal. The group also maintained a strict hierarchy. At the top were the true architects, the ones who pulled the strings and dictated the agenda. Most members, including myself, never interacted directly with these individuals. Instead, we dealt with intermediaries, people who enforced their will and ensured everyone stayed in line. These individuals held an almost godlike status within the organization, and questioning them was unthinkable. One of the most chilling aspects of my time in the Illuminati was their ability to manipulate reality. They had access to resources that allowed them to create narratives, destroy reputations, and even orchestrate major events. I saw firsthand how they used media, politics, and even religion to shape public perception. They weren't just reacting to the world, they were actively creating it. There was also a constant undercurrent of fear. Every member knew the consequences of disobedience. Whispers of people disappearing, of lives ruined overnight, were enough to keep everyone in line. Even those who seemed untouchable lived under the shadow of the organization's power. What struck me most was the way they justified their actions. They believed they were the stewards of humanity, guiding the world toward a future they deemed necessary. To them, the sacrifices they demanded were for the greater good. But to me, it was clear they had crossed a linear line that blurred morality, ethics, and humanity itself. The deeper I went, the more I realized that staying meant losing myself entirely. Yet leaving wasn't an option, or so I thought. What I had witnessed was more than enough to make me a target, and the idea of escape felt like signing my own death warrant. Still, I knew I couldn't remain part of something so deeply corrupt and dangerous. I would have to make a choice, and the cost would be higher than I ever imagined. Once I was firmly embedded within the Illuminati, I began to see the extent of their influence. Their power wasn't just limited to a few key industries or a handful of high-ranking individuals. It was global, pervasive, and meticulously organized. What most people see as coincidence, random events, or the natural flow of society is, in many cases, the result of deliberate manipulation by this group. Their primary tool of control is influence in governments, corporations, and even the cultural fabric of society. They operate in the shadows, pulling strings that direct the actions of leaders and the decisions of nations. Elections are swayed, policies are drafted, and wars are started or ended based on their agenda. This is not conspiracy theory. It's the reality I witnessed. The media plays a crucial role in their strategy. They understand that controlling information means controlling the narrative. Major media outlets are either directly influenced or subtly guided to present stories in ways that align with their goals. From shaping public opinion to diverting attention from critical issues, the media is one of their most powerful weapons. Economically, their reach is even more staggering. They don't just manipulate markets, they create them. Industries rise and fall based on their desires. Entire economies can be destabilized to serve their purposes. I was privy to conversations where the collapse of a country's currency was discussed as casually as a stock portfolio adjustment. Even cultural trends are not immune to their influence. The entertainment industry, for example, is a carefully curated tool for distraction and subtle indoctrination. Certain symbols, messages, and themes are repeated to normalize ideas or plant seeds of thought in the public consciousness. What seems like harmless entertainment often carries hidden meanings designed to serve their agenda. What shocked me most was their long-term vision. The Illuminati doesn't think in years or even decades, they think in centuries. Their plans are methodical, designed to unfold over generations. They play the long game, understanding that true control isn't achieved overnight but through careful, calculated steps. Despite their immense power, their actions are rarely overt. They thrive on plausible deniability, ensuring that their involvement remains hidden. This is why so many people dismiss their existence as mere conspiracy. They rely on secrecy, and anyone who gets too close to the truth is quickly silenced, either through discrediting, financial ruin, or worse. The scale of their operation is overwhelming, and the realization of how deeply they are embedded in every aspect of society is terrifying. It made me question everything I thought I knew about the world. The hardest part, though, was coming to terms with my role in it. I wasn't just a bystander, I was a participant, and that guilt would become the driving force behind my decision to leave and speak out, no matter the cost. Leaving the Illuminati wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was the result of years of inner turmoil. When I joined, I was blinded by ambition and the allure of power, but over time, the cracks began to show, and the true cost of my involvement became impossible to ignore. At first, the moral compromises seemed small, turning a blind eye to certain actions or endorsing decisions that made me uncomfortable. But as I climbed the ranks, the demands grew darker. I witnessed acts of manipulation, corruption, and control that went against everything I once believed in. What made it worse was the justifications they provided. They framed everything as being for the greater good. But deep down, I knew the truth. It was about power, plain and simple. The turning point came during a series of events I can't go into full detail about for my safety. What I can say is that I was asked to participate in something that crossed every ethical line I had left. Refusal wasn't an option without serious consequences. So I complied, but it broke me. I realized I was no longer the person I used to be. The personal toll was devastating. My relationships suffered as I couldn't tell anyone the truth about my life. I was constantly paranoid, knowing I was being monitored. Every decision I made felt like walking a tightrope, and I began to feel like a prisoner in my own life. What made it worse was seeing how my actions contributed to the suffering of others. I watched as people were manipulated, entire communities destabilized, and lives destroyed, all to further the organization's agenda. The guilt became unbearable, and I started to question whether the power and wealth were worth the price of my soul. What finally pushed me to leave was a realization: no amount of power could make me feel free. The Illuminati promised to give me control, but in reality, I had lost all control over my own life. I was a pawn in their game, no different from the millions of people they manipulated daily. Leaving was the most dangerous decision I've ever made. I knew the risks. They don't let people walk away without consequences. But I also knew that staying would mean losing whatever shred of humanity I had left. The fear of retaliation is real, but so is the need to expose the truth. The road to leaving wasn't easy, and I'll share more about how I managed to escape in the next part of my story. For now, all I can say is this: if you're ever tempted by the promise of power and influence, ask yourself what it will cost, because I've seen firsthand that the price is far higher than you can imagine. Escaping the Illuminati was never going to be easy. In fact, it was something I knew might cost me everything: my wealth, my connections, my very life. But as the years went on, staying became more dangerous than leaving. I had come to a point where I couldn't keep living with the guilt of my involvement. I needed to escape, even if it meant facing unimaginable consequences. When I made the decision to leave, I had to be careful. The Illuminati is not a group that takes kindly to betrayal. There are no safe exits, no clean break. They don't just let you go. They make sure you understand the price of defying them. I started to plan my escape in secret, knowing that the moment I made any move, I'd be under surveillance. One of the first things I did was distance myself from anyone who could be a potential threat. I stopped attending meetings, avoided making direct contact with other members, and started deleting any trace of my involvement. Every time I made a move, I knew they were watching. I couldn't trust anyone, not even the people I had once considered my closest allies. It took months of careful maneuvering before I felt even remotely ready. But I knew that I couldn't keep living like this, constantly looking over my shoulder, feeling trapped in a life I had chosen out of ambition but now regretted deeply. The decision to cut ties was a matter of survival. But even as I began to prepare for my exit, I knew it wouldn't be simple. The Illuminati has a network of people everywhere, people who work for them directly, and others who unknowingly serve their interests. Breaking free meant cutting ties with everyone and everything I had known for years. It meant walking away from a world that was built on secrets and control. I had to make sure I didn't leave any trace behind. My contacts, the businesses, the money, it all had to disappear. At the same time, I had to create a false narrative. The last thing I wanted was for the Illuminati to think I had betrayed them. If they believed I had just fallen out of favor or had been targeted by someone else, I might have a chance at survival. The moment I decided to leave, I felt both a sense of relief and an overwhelming fear. My world, everything I had known for years, was about to come crashing down. I couldn't go back. The illusion of power, wealth, and influence I had once cherished would be gone. But it was nothing compared to the fear of what would happen if I stayed. I reached out to people who I trusted for my life before the Illuminati, the few who were still in my corner. They helped me to disappear, cutting ties with anyone who might have been watching or listening. It wasn't perfect, and I still had to be cautious, but it was a start. The escape itself wasn't some grand dramatic gesture. It was quiet, methodical, and incredibly risky. I spent months in hiding, changing my appearance, moving from place to place, and constantly monitoring my back. Even in the shadows, I could feel their presence. They didn't let people go easily, and I knew they wouldn't stop searching for me until I was either dead or silenced. But I had made my choice. I couldn't live in that world anymore. The hardest part wasn't just the fear of retaliation, it was the loss. I lost everything. All the wealth, the connections, the influence. It meant nothing when I realized what I had become. The price of living that life had stripped away my humanity. I had become someone I didn't even recognize, a person whose values were shaped by power and control, rather than compassion and honesty. In my time of hiding, I had to come to terms with the choices I had made. I realized that I had given away my soul for the illusion of control, and that was something no amount of money or power could ever replace. It was a lesson learned too late. I also had to confront the emptiness that came with abandoning everything I had worked for. There was no safety net, no return to the life I once knew. The world I had been part of no longer existed for me. I was living in exile, not just from the Illuminati, but from the person I had once been. But even as I faced these dark realities, I knew leaving was the only option for me. The Illuminati, for all their power, could never control my conscience. They could never take away the core of who I was, the part of me that still believed in right and wrong, in freedom, and in humanity. In the end, my escape was more than just leaving an organization. It was about reclaiming myself. It was about walking away from the shadows and stepping into the light, even if it meant facing the consequences of my actions. The fear of what they might do to me still lingers. There are days when I wake up and wonder if they're watching, if they're coming for me. But no matter what happens next, I know I've done the right thing. I can't undo the past, but I can control the future. And that's the one thing the Illuminati could never take away from me. Now, my mission is to expose the truth, to warn others of the dangers of ambition without morality. The world needs to know what's happening behind the scenes, and I'll do whatever it takes to make sure the darkness is brought to light, even if it means risking my life once again. Because no matter the price, the truth must be told. The consequences of leaving the Illuminati are real, and they are severe. There's no way to sugarcoat it. The moment I turned my back on them, I knew my life would never be the same. They don't just forget about those who betray them, they make sure to send a message. And I have been on the receiving end of that message ever since. The first few months after I left were a blur of constant fear and paranoia. Every knock on the door made my heart race. Every unfamiliar face in a crowd felt like a threat. I never knew who could be watching, who might be working for them, or who might be looking to silence me. The uncertainty was unbearable. In many ways, I felt like a ghost cut off from the world I knew, but also hunted by the very forces I had once served. But the fear didn't just come from the outside, it also came from within. I had to live with the guilt of everything I had done during my time in the Illuminati. The choices I had made, the lives I had impacted, and the people I had hurt. I couldn't escape the weight of it. I had walked away from power, but in doing so, I had lost the comfort it once provided. No amount of money or luxury could fill the void that came from turning my back on everything I had once believed in. Even though I tried to disappear, the shadow of the Illuminati still looms over me. They don't allow people to just walk away. There are rumors, whispers, and threats that follow me wherever I go. People have approached me with messages that feel like coded warnings, reminding me that I'm always under their watch. And as much as I want to move on and rebuild my life, I know the reality. They won't just let me live in peace. Despite everything, I still don't regret my decision. I know I had to leave, even if it meant losing everything I had built. The freedom I gained by walking away from that life is worth more than any material wealth or power they could offer. But it hasn't been easy. The isolation, the fear, the constant reminders of what I gave up, they all weigh heavily on me. But what I've learned through all of this is that there's no price worth paying for your soul. Power, wealth, and control, those things are temporary. They can't buy happiness, they can't buy peace, and they can't buy the sense of self that I've slowly begun to rebuild. Now, my mission is to share my story and expose the truth, to show others that there is another way, one that doesn't require selling your soul, and to warn anyone who might be considering the same path I once walked. The price is higher than you can ever imagine. The truth may be dangerous, but it's also liberating. I've paid a high price for the choices I made, but I will not let fear silence me. I refuse to let them continue operating in the shadows, manipulating people and controlling the world from behind the scenes. I've faced the consequences of my actions. Now it's time for them to face the truth. And no matter what happens to me, I will never stop speaking out. Because the truth is the only weapon I have left, and I will use it to fight for the freedom that was taken from me.